have you with us on this Friday edition of Ed Schultz News and Commentary. You know, in sports, especially baseball, they always ask the question, okay, what's the magic number? Well, it's 4 or 5. Well, the magic number's down to 1. That's how many games a team has to win before they win the pennant, so they can go to the playoffs. What's the magic number? What's the magic number for the American people and our Congress? Is it 360, 365? Or are we actually going to do something at public shooting, mass shooting number 355? There's a lot of conversation right now in the aftermath of what unfolded in San Bernardino. But let me just go on record saying that the Republicans don't have a hair on their ass when it comes to doing anything about gun legislation in this country. This is Paul Ryan, again, blaming it on healthcare, blaming it on mental illness, how we have to address mental illness. Yet it's the Republicans who repeatedly in the House have voted down legislation to, or should I say voted for legislation to get rid of Obamacare that would affect 17 million people. They're even talking about doing reconciliation in the Senate and sending it to the president's desk because they don't like the health care plan. You mean to tell me that there are 17 million people in this country who can get health care but have no mental problems whatsoever, and maybe we should make sure that they don't have a firearm? The Republicans are amazing. This isn't about mental illness to the Republicans. This isn't about gun rights to the Republicans. This is about being reelected. This is about making sure that they're not going to be a political target, that they're not going to be in the crosshairs of the National Rifle Association come election time and get this negative rating for the NRA. And, oh, by the way, he just doesn't fit for the Republicans and gun rights. He doesn't fit for the American people and freedom, American exceptionalism. Notice how the mainstream media does absolutely no stories about what it's like to get a firearm in Europe. Next week on this broadcast, I will bring to you on Ed Schultz News and Commentary the facts about how hard it is to get a firearm in Europe. It'll be interesting, and you'll agree with me that you'll never see this kind of story in the American media because the lobbying of the gun manufacturers and the NRA is just too strong. So as long as we have Republicans in any office, we're never going to get any. There's never going to be any magic number. We're not going to get it. But let's play Paul Ryan. He seems to have the solution now for gun violence in America.
But what we have seen in a common theme among many of these mass shootings is a theme of mental illness. And we need to fix our mental illness laws, our policies. They're outdated. And that is something that we are working on right now. We're moving a bill through the process here, the Murphy legislation, because we think that's one of the more consistent and common themes, which are people with mental illness are getting guns and conducting these mass shootings.
So, Mr. Ryan, are you actually going to set up a system so these people in this country who don't have insurance and have mental issues are going to be able to see a doctor and are going to be able to get some counseling and get some help? Is that the bill you're talking about? Is that part of voting down Obamacare again? You're a phony. You're a total phony. And it sounds good to say that you're going to do something about mental illness in this country. Let's cut to the chase. Let's go to the campaign trail. Again, Bernie Sanders from Vermont, where gun control in Vermont is a hell of a lot different than it is in New York City or Los Angeles. The fact of the matter is we've got some common sense on the campaign trail. This is Bernie's reaction.
It is very difficult for the American people to keep up with the mass shootings that we seem to see almost every day. Yesterday, San Bernardino. A few days ago, Colorado Springs. Before that, Roseburg, Oregon. Before that, Chattanooga, Tennessee. And on it goes. The San Bernardino shooting was the 355th mass shooting this year. Gun violence has reached epidemic levels in the United States. Over the past decade, 275,000 Americans have been killed by guns.
So what would be good for America to make the move to curb these mass shootings, Senator Sanders?
There is a broad consensus, perhaps 60-70% of the American people who agree on common sense gun safety legislation. And here is what that consensus is about, supported by a strong majority of the American people. We need to significantly expand and improve background checks Who is arguing that people who should not have guns because of a criminal background, because of mental problems, should not be able to purchase those guns? Very few Americans disagree with that. We need to renew the assault weapons ban. We need to end the sale of high-capacity magazines. We need to make gun trafficking a federal crime and give law enforcement the tools they need to get illegal guns off of the streets. We need to close the gun show loophole, as well as loopholes that allow gun purchasers to buy a gun after the waiting period expires without a completed background check. We need to close loopholes that allow domestic abusers and stalkers to obtain guns. We need to strengthen penalties for straw purchasers who buy guns from licensed dealers on behalf of somebody prohibited from purchasing a gun. And very significantly, we need to greatly expand and improve our mental health capabilities.
So there you have. I couldn't count them. I think it was about 10, 11 different measures that Senator Sanders is going to put forward if he's president of the United States. The fact is the country is ready for at least background checks. We were ready for background checks after Sandy Hook. 90% of Americans wanted background checks, but we couldn't get them then either. And I'll never forget when I was at the Capitol just before the State of the Union address a year ago, right after Sandy Hook, and I ran into Senator Charles Schumer. Chuck Schumer from New York says, we're going to get something done. And I said, Senator, you're not going to get anything done. And he couldn't believe what I was saying to him. So you're not going to get background checks. You're not going to get anything. And they didn't. There is this belief in Congress that, we can get something done. You can't get anything done because Republicans are in the way. Nancy Pelosi knows it.
Gun violence is a crisis of epidemic proportion in our nation. We've had far too many moments of silence on the floor of the House. And while it is right to respectfully acknowledge the losses, we can no longer remain silent. What gives us the right to hold moments of silence when we do nothing to act upon the cause of the grief?
So what has to happen here, folks? And this is political tough talk. If the Democrats don't want any silence, then they have to speak up and just tell the American people, we can't get anything done on gun violence because Republicans are in the way. Put it on the obstructors. Put it on the people who always defend a piece of paper that was 225 years old or whatever, back in a society that doesn't even exist today. The Second Amendment. There has to be rules and regulations for a contemporary society. But until the Democrats become not silent and say that we can't do gun violence control in this country or any kind of gun measures because Republicans are in the way, then maybe you might strike a nerve with the American people to get rid of some of these jackasses who live by an old document that is just totally outdated. We've changed the Constitution before, we've added to the Constitution, but we simply cannot do anything about gun violence in America. This is Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut.
But right now, these thoughts and prayers and sympathies have become a mask for inaction, and they are wholly insufficient. And so my point, I don't know what the New York Daily News is trying to communicate, but my point is that thoughts and prayers are great, but they've got to be followed up with action. And what is so offensive is that in the wake of another mass shooting, we have a gigantic menu of policy options at our disposal to try to cut down on this carnage, and we're not pursuing any of them. We are just absolutely frozen. And listen, maybe I shouldn't tweet in anger, but I'm angry that we're not doing anything to try to stop this.
And you won't, Senator, until you get on the cables and say, because of the Republicans, we can't get anything done. That's the next conversation America has to have. It has to be political. It has to be in Washington, and there has to be a change of thought. This isn't about gun rights. This is about being reelected and not becoming a political target by those who lobby for the gun manufacturers and the National Rifle Association. When we come back, Tad Devine, who is the political strategist and leader for the Sanders campaign, here on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. We're right back. Hey, folks, you've heard me talk about BioGreen Clean. I'm going to show you right now on my airplane just how tough this is. I want you to keep in mind, chemical-free, 100% plant-derived, biodegradable. It is the safest cleaner that you can get, and it's the most effective. Go to our website, wegotahead.com, or go to biogreenclean.com. www.biogreenclean and order today. It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
Good to have you with us on this Friday edition. Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this production. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I have never seen anyone polling at 5% get as much media attention as the governor from New Jersey. He must have pictures of the media doing something that's really, really nasty for him to continually get this kind of coverage. And I think it's time that Democrats realize they're going to be running against Trump. This is not a summer sensation. There's no fallout. It's going to be Trump. He now has a 20-point lead on the rest of the field. And whether he wins Iowa or not, whether he wins New Hampshire or not, doesn't matter. He has the money for the long haul. He's basically in the same position that Hillary Clinton is in. Hillary Clinton might not win Iowa. She might not win New Hampshire, but she probably will get the nomination, right? Who knows? It's a crazy world out there. But it would seem to me that Trump, who is the front runner consistently for months on end, is offering up the agenda to run against as far as the Democrats are concerned. For more on that, let's turn to Tad Devine, who is a longtime media consultant and advisor and leader for the Sanders campaign. Tad, good to have you with us.
Nice to be with you, Ed.
On the heels of this gun violence that we saw in San Bernardino the other day, it seems that Bernie Sanders is the candidate that is coming out with a litany of things that this country could do. What's the political play there? What do you make of it?
Well, listen, I think Bernie has always been a very strong advocate of common sense gun safety. You know, I mean, this is a guy who in 1988 stood up when he first ran for Congress and said, we need to ban assault weapons in America. He did it in a rural state. He did it at great political peril to himself. He did it because he felt it was the right thing to do for Vermont and for America. And, you know, and I understand, you know, people grab a couple of votes from 30 years ago and say, aha, Bernie Sanders is beholden to the gun lobby. Nothing could be further from the truth. The guy has always been on the side of people. He has, been a common sense advocate for common sense gun safety. And I think, this whole campaign right now, frankly, I feel there are always going to be incidents that happen, whether it's the tragedy in San Bernardino or what happened in Paris. But I think the campaign and the election next year is going to be decided on basic economic circumstances that the American people are confronting today. And nobody's better on that than Bernie Sanders.
Ted, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think that economic issues are very, very important. But the gun violence in this country, it has become a social concern. It's almost as if it's a disease. It's an epidemic. We do things about that. It's almost like what the AIDS breakout was back in the 80s. I mean, 300. What's the magic number before we do something about it in Congress? And the fact is, Republicans are in the way. They are the reason why we can't get what Bernie Sanders is calling for. Right. So no matter how you look at it, there's a political angle to this. There's a party that doesn't want to do anything when it comes to gun violence. Is it dangerous politically to frame it like that?
No, it's not. I think it's the truth. The truth is never dangerous, Ed. And, the fact is that the Republican Party is completely and utterly beholden to the gun lobby in America, to the NRA. Yeah. They do their bidding every single day. They did it yesterday in the United States Senate. And, I think, Bernie's been very strong. He was standing there with his colleagues yesterday advocating for proposals that would protect the American people. The Republicans are completely in the tank for the NRA, and they're going to stay there.
What did they do yesterday in the Senate?
Well, there was an attempt, to pass some common sense gun safety and measures in the United States Senate to say that people who are on a terrorist watch list should not be able to purchase guns. Okay, I mean, I don't see how something could make more sense than that. The Republicans did the bidding in the NRA; they stopped it. Bernie stood there with Chuck Schumer's and others leaders in the Senate to say, "We need this legislation. We need it now," and the Republicans once again stopped it.
Amazing. All right. You trail Hillary Clinton nationally, slightly trail her in Iowa, and in some polls you lead in New Hampshire. As a checkpoint right now, where are the Sanders folks in this campaign?
Ed, I feel really good about where we are. If you're going to win the nomination against a prohibitive frontrunner, the way Obama did, for example, in 2008, and the way that Gary Hart could have. I worked for Walter Mondale in '84, and I saw how close Gary Hart came and the way he could have won that nomination. You have to do certain things, and I think Bernie Sanders and his campaign are doing all those things right now. We're building strong campaigns in the early states in Iowa and New Hampshire. We've been on television for 4 weeks with paid advertising in Iowa and New Hampshire. Hillary's been on for 4 months. And I really think we're beginning to get our message through to voters in those early states. We've been on the radio in Nevada and South Carolina with targeted advertising. We've built a huge campaign organization that is powered by over 1 million contributions, most of them small contributions by people all across this country. Bernie's not beholden in any way to special interests. He's beholden to people who need change. And I think, as we build this, we're getting on the ballot in every state all across the country. We're building organizations beyond the February states into the into the March 1st states all across this country. I feel really, really good about how we are positioned. We're approaching this not as a national primary. It's not a national primary. Everybody's not going to vote in one, all across America on February 1st. We're going to start voting in Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina, and we're building a process to succeed in that environment. And actually, even the national polling. I mean, people, I think, saw the Quinnipiac poll last week. Hillary's got a large lead with Democrats. They do. But to see Bernie Sanders, who still is not known by 25% of the general election voters, they don't know him yet. They're getting to know him. But to see him have the highest net favorability of any candidate, Democrat or Republican, to see him beating Republicans by as much or more than Hillary Clinton is already right now in general election matchups, to see the strength he has on issues and attributes underneath that poll. I mean, I'm just very impressed that he's in the position he's in, and I think we're in a position to win.
Okay. If you're up against Trump, you win the nomination, you win the election?
I believe so. I think 140 million people turn out to vote in a general election. 70, 80 million people tune into those debates. I think Bernie Sanders is going to have an absolutely great day, and not only get himself elected president of the United States, he will, in a matchup against Trump, I believe, elect a Democratic Senate and a healthy majority in a Democratic Senate, and I think we have a real chance at the House because Bernie can build a coalition that can not only elect himself, but can elect Democrats at all levels. That's the difference.
So it's a movement. It's a movement. Of course, the mainstream media won't call it that at all. All right. Does it frustrate your campaign that Chris Christie seems to be everywhere and he's polling almost in the toilet? I mean, I've never seen a guy at 5% get as much media attention as this guy does. And I've often thought if Bernie got half of what Christie got, the numbers would be a hell of a lot different.
Well, listen, if Chris Christie had Bernie Sanders' numbers in Iowa and New Hampshire, I don't think we'd do anything except see Chris Christie on TV, okay? I mean, it is unbelievable. But listen, we're not frustrated in the least by anything or anybody. I'm very pleased about where we are. I mean, Bernie is working really hard. He's in New Hampshire right now. He was in the Senate yesterday voting and then hopped on a plane last night to get to New Hampshire. He's going to be there this weekend. And I think we just have to focus on our strategy, delivering a message, that this country has a rigged economy. It sends most of the wealth to the top. It's held in place by a corrupt system of campaign finance. That's what he's going to talk about, and I think the American people are going to respond to it. Tad Devine, always great to visit. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much. You bet.
Tad Devine, longtime political consultant, and he's heading up the advisory team of the Bernie Sanders campaign. And I think it's one of the reasons why Sanders is doing as well as he is. When we come back, Jonathan Alter, back to the gun violence. Why won't Congress move on this? That's next on Ed Schultz News and Commentary.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for the view at WeGotEd.com, RingofFireRadio.com, and also RawStory.com. Jonathan Alter, author, MSNBC Political analyst, award-winning journalist, and columnist for the Daily Beast, joins us. Jonathan, good to have you on.
Great to be here, Ed.
I want our listeners and viewers to hear your take on why Congress can't get anything done on any kind of firearm measures or gun measures in this country. In the wake of San Bernardino, mass shooting number 355 this year, why can't Congress move on this? What's the problem?
Because they're owned lock, stock, and barrel by the NRA. You know, it's not a lot more complicated than that. And the NRA has had its mitts into both Democrats and Republicans in recent decades, but in recent years, they've had more success on the Republican side. The Republicans now control both chambers, so even really common sense gun safety ideas are going nowhere. But I think we're about to see a test of just how crazy this is. The president mentioned this the other day after San Bernardino. You know, people who are on what are called no-fly lists, who are security risks for flying planes into buildings, obvious terrorist risks, even if they haven't been arrested for terrorism, but are considered to be risky, they can go into a gun store and legally buy a gun. In other words, you can't get on a plane, but you can buy a gun. That is truly insane. And I think that what needs to happen and might happen is that the Republicans who go along with that idea have to decide whether their support for guns trumps their opposition to terrorism.
Jonathan,
if they really want to say that their gun ideas are more important than stopping terrorists, I'd like to see them out in public having to defend that over and over again.
Jonathan, politically, do the Democrats need to become more vocal about this in blaming Republicans? And it's old-style politics, I know, and vilifying the other side, but the fact is the fact that we can't get anything done on gun violence in America, any measures at all, because of the Republicans. And I don't hear the Democrats laying the straight talk out there like that and putting the onus on the majority in the House and talking about the filibusters in the Senate. What do you? Of course, it wouldn't be now because they have the majority. What about that?
Well, I mean, they have been stepping up their rhetoric on guns. So Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were out there in the immediate aftermath of San Bernardino talking about this. It used to be that politicians would wait until after the funerals, and they would, be worried about politicizing the issue too quickly. Now both sides go right to the politics.
You have to. That's how you get change.
Immediate aftermath. Yeah. So Hillary is doing that, but I agree with you that she's not doing it quite a pointed enough way. I think one of the things that has kept it from being turned into more of a partisan issue is that, for instance, on the background check vote in the wake of the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary in 2013, there were a certain number of Democratic votes that prevented that from becoming law. So, so Democrats from rural areas, and I think you know more about this than I do, Ed, have not been great on this issue. But they're going to have to decide that they're willing to take on the gun nuts in their states, and I think that they can do so successfully on issues like access of people on no-fly lists to guns. I mean, you have to be kind of deranged to believe that somebody who was a risk for being a terrorist should be able to go in and buy a gun.
Well, the president keeps pointing out how other countries don't have this problem. Well, the other countries have laws that we don't have, and they have a much safer society. But we, of course, are stuck on this lobbying structure that it's not about gun rights. It's about whether these guys are going to get reelected or not. It's about whether they're going to become a political target and have to go home and face an ad saying that they're anti-American and they're gun grabbers and that they want to take away their rights and they're against freedom. That's the crap that they would face unless they walk in lockstep with the NRA.
Ed, what worked for you? Correct me if I'm wrong, but some years ago you underwent a little bit of a change of heart on these issues. What worked for you in convincing you that the NRA was wrong on certain issues?
Well, I think we all have to come to a personal awareness of what we believe in. I've never owned a pistol in my life. I've never fired a pistol in my life. I have no desire to do that. I'm going pheasant hunting this weekend with a bunch of my friends in western North Dakota, where I've got a 12-gauge shotgun. I've got a 10-gauge shotgun for goose hunting that I haven't fired in 15 years. I mean, but I think that society changes. Social mores change. Our attitudes towards drunk driving 30 years ago are a hell of a lot different than what they are right now. Our attitudes towards gun ownership and usage and access are a lot different today than what they were 30 years ago. Society moves forward. And I think that what moved me was common sense. A background check will not impede on my rights. They can background check Ed Schultz all day, and they can do whatever they want. It will not impede on what I'm going to do this weekend for recreation. And I think that's common sense. And I think that I would not view an extensive background check as intrusion. I would view it as a safety measure to help the country curb what is a real social problem right now. It's a social problem. And I also find it unbelievably inconsistent that now Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, who's in a position to do something about it, is saying that, it's a mental illness issue and we got to address that, yet he votes down Obamacare. He wants to get rid of Obamacare, but he has nothing to replace it with. You're going to tell me that 17 million people in this country who are not going to have health care if you get the Republican way wouldn't be an at-risk owner of a firearm? Of course they would. So they speak out of both sides of their mouth. But in answer to your question, I think that the country has to have a re-examination of what is common sense, what is the issue, and let's deal with it. If you get the NRA out of the way, if you get the lobbyists out of the way, I think you're going to get the will of the people.
Yeah, a lot of NRA members think that the organization they belong to is out of line because they remember that 20 years ago, in the 90s, background checks were the NRA's position. They were for instant background checks. People forget this. They didn't want a 5-day waiting period, but they were happy when the technology came along. to have instant background checks. Now that technology exists, and they don't want to use it.
Yeah.
And they're reversing the position that they used to ascribe to. And the gun show loophole is totally indefensible.
Yeah.
You know, so
I've never purchased a gun at a gun show in my life. I think I've been to one gun show, and I just was kind of bored with it. I don't have any use for it. I don't, and I'm not a gun collector. Never have been. Never will be. I think there are some basic
collectors. They can be gun collectors and go to gun shows. They just have to, at the gun shows, they just have to be set up to do the instant background check, so they can't sell guns. I mean, there's no reason they should be exempt.
I feel personally, Jonathan, that if I go buy a pistol, then I become part of the problem. That's where I am personally right now. Mm-hmm. I don't think do I have protection? Yeah, I do. I got my shotguns, my hunting rifles. They're not, at my bedside. But I got a couple of dogs that bark pretty good. I just think it's just such a social issue right now, such a social problem right now that we're inept if we sit here silent and not force our elected officials to do something about it. They need that. We're at a point where those who don't want to do anything, they need to defend themselves beyond the Constitution. They need to address the social problem. And if they think mental illness is the way to go, then they need to reconcile where they stand on health care in this country.
Well, I'm okay with them passing a bill on mental health. Let's just get it through and then deal with the other issues. I don't think Democrats are right to stop that. They should. If Paul Ryan wants to pass a lot of new funding for mental health, people need it. Let's just get it done and then return to the gun debate. But the idea that we're going to hold up the mental health bill until they cry uncle on guns, that's just a way to not get a mental health bill.
Yeah.
So, I'm okay with them moving forward on Ryan's bill. I just think that they need now to surface this issue of of terrorism. I mean, at a minimum, let's deal with that. And we have to break the stranglehold of the NRA on a couple of easier issues first, before we can build a movement to return sanity. And the first one, given the climate on terrorism, is just to end this ridiculous situation where guys who are on a no-fly list, who are in danger of killing us all, can go in and buy a gun with no problem. That is truly insane.
Jonathan Alter, always great to visit, always a great conversation. I appreciate your time. Have a great one, my friend. Thanks.
Take care.
You bet. This is Ed Schultz News and Commentary, brought to you by Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team. Have a great weekend. We're back Monday.